So what it takes is humility and somebody who's willing to really step in your life, whether you want them to, you ask them to, or they force their way in.
Yeah.
Because they see that you're just like you're going
You need
down.
help.
Yeah, you need help.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Steadfast Men Unscripted. I'm your host, Matt Antis, and today I have a very special guest with me today. His name is Nick Muyres. Nick is a husband, a father, a Navy veteran, and a current pastor of a church here local in Pittsburgh. So, Nick, thank you, man. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I know we just met. We just talked a little bit before the show about the purpose of this show, and so we met through a mutual friend, Michelle Saray.
Yes.
So shout out to Michelle. Thank you for connecting the two of us. But yeah, today, like I said, it's just going to be a simple story of how you came to know the Lord, what God has done in your life, the amazing things that he's done. Obviously, you're a pastor now, so obviously at some point, God put on your heart to do some greater things for the Lord. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're from Pittsburgh, local to Pittsburgh, or no?
I was raised in Pittsburgh. I moved here when I was 11.
Okay.
But I was born in Yulee, Florida. My dad was a Navy man also.
Okay.
So
nice. And so you did you grow up in the church or not in the church or what?
No. I was it's okay. My parents had me in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was stationed at Kings Bay, which is the base that I ultimately went to go get stationed at later on in life.
Mm-hmm.
But they divorced early in my life, I think around 2 or something.
Okay.
My dad was not, he was an abusive man.
Okay.
And they divorced, and we moved up to Connecticut before they divorced. There's a submarine base up there, and my dad was stationed there for a time. They divorced. My dad went back down to Kings Bay in Georgia, and I stayed up there with my mom. Okay. And during that time, we did go to a church. It was a First Baptist church, which if you know anything about the First Baptist denomination, or the American Baptist denomination rather, knowing what I know now, I'm like, that was a weird experience. They're like super high churchy, like robes and candles and processions, but then they like say the Pledge of Allegiance,
really,
and they pledge the Christian flag like before service. So it's just a weird dynamic. Yeah. Anyway, but we went to that church until I was, I don't know, 9 or 10. Okay. So from maybe 7 years or something. Mm-hmm. My mom meets a man who's my stepdad, still my stepdad, and they get married, and we moved to Pittsburgh. He was from Pittsburgh. Okay. So we moved to Pittsburgh. I'm like 11, somewhere 10, 11, 12, something like that. Okay. And we moved to Pittsburgh, and so I was and those are pretty formative years. I consider myself to have been raised here. However, I was not born and raised here, a fact which my wife lovingly never lets me forget. So there's
that you're not a Yinzer?
That I'm not a true Yinzer. That's right.
That's okay.
I can do the Pittsburgh accent really well, but she's like, just stop, Nick.
Yeah.
You're not from here. You're not one of us.
Oh man.
It's funny.
So, and you grew up in Shaler then, I think you mentioned?
Well, I grew up in the North Hills, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Shaler. My wife grew up in the North Hills also. Okay. We both went to high school together. Okay, cool. But yeah, North Hills, right on McKnight Road.
So when you were in high school, you just said you guys met in high school. Mm-hmm. Were you? How were you in high school? Were you?
How was I in high school? Yeah,
were you
awful?
Living? Okay, all right. Well, there we go.
Terrible person.
Okay.
We wouldn't have been friends. You would have been like, I don't want anything to do with you. Not a good guy.
So like you being on a Christian podcast would probably not have like lined up with your life in high school.
No.
Okay.
No.
Interesting.
I was a pagan. I didn't become a Christian until I was 22.
22.
Okay. So it was, my wife and I met in 8th grade, and my first memory of this beautiful woman was of her drooling on books. Anyway, they used to wheel those carts with books into your classroom.
Yep.
Like, hey, come pick some books. We both went up to the book trough at the same time, and she looks up to me with a mouthful of braces and just a big, and I'm like, huh, I'm gonna marry you.
That was it.
I'm gonna marry you one day. Yeah, like you're glorious.
That's funny.
Well, so we ended up getting married. We dated in our senior year of high school.
Okay.
But anyway, but yeah, North Hills, and not a great, wasn't a good guy, wasn't a Christian, this is not a justification. It's just a statistical reality. Boys who grow up without a father, a paternal father, right, a biological father, to discipline them, correct them, right, bring them up properly. They usually, statistically, they do very poorly.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm very lucky. I'm very thankful to God that I did not end up in jail, right? Because that happens a lot to guys who grow up without dads.
Yeah.
So really, I fared a lot better than a lot of other guys who don't have dads, and a lot of that's because the man my mom married, he was always, while not my biological father, so like he didn't discipline me, he didn't do those things, but he did provide. He worked very hard. He gave us a good home, and I had everything I needed.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other people who don't have dads, they end up being destitute because their dads aren't providing for them.
Yeah.
Right. So there was a lot of blessing there that God provided for me, but by way of like moral, ethical correction, that wasn't really there. And I'm not blaming him.
Yeah.
It's awkward to be like, you're not my kid, you're my wife's kid, and now I'm going to bend you over my knee and spank you.
Right.
Like, that just doesn't happen a whole lot. That's really weird, so.
So then, did you go to college around the area or what?
After
high school?
After I joined the Navy.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I joined the Navy in high school.
Okay.
So I was in the delayed entry program, DEP. I think I joined when I was 17. My dad was in the Navy, like I said, and he was very. I remember I asked him what it was like the summer going into my senior year, or like one of the breaks during my senior year. And I asked my dad. I said, "So, Dad, you gonna?" I was like, "You gonna send me to college? Like, what am I gonna do after high school?"
Yeah.
He's like, "I am not sending you to college. Like, not even no way." I was like, "Why not?" And I think I remember him being like, "You are not smart enough. Like, you are dumb."
Wow.
I was like, "Wow,
Thanks,
really
Dad."
Wind out of my sails. No, he wasn't wrong. Wasn't wrong. Well, let me just skip forward. One day, this was years later. My wife and I were married. We're Christians, and I'm in college. I'm loving doctrine, loving reading books and books and books and books.
Yeah.
And books. Carly, and my wife's named Carly. She says, "Nick, you're not stupid. You just never tried." And I was like, "You may be onto something." This anyway.
Yeah.
So my dad says, he's like, "You're gonna join the Navy. Not do you want to?
Yeah.
It's you're going
Ultimatum,
to,
yeah.
right? You're gonna do it." I was like, "Okay, whatever you say, Pop."
Yeah.
So I joined the Navy, and senior year. Yeah, I guess I was 17 or 18. I guess.
Do you go to basic before your senior year? Like some branches, they'll send you before.
No, I didn't do that.
Okay.
I actually went. So I graduated June of 9.
Okay. I
go to basic December of 9.
Okay.
2009.
Okay. About the same age, huh? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, at late entry program. So I joined the Navy. I go to MEPS downtown.
Yep.
Downtown. Yeah. And
did the duck walk?
Yep. I had that old guy with the white hair, white beard. Check parts of me that nobody should look at.
Yep.
It's always that guy.
Right.
And I remember I took my ASVAB, and you know how the ASVAB works, right? So like you and I could get the same score, but in totally different areas of the test, right? So our aptitudes are in different places. So I don't remember the score I got. It was a decent score, and I had like 14 different job options, and one of them was like a rescue, like a helicopter rescue diver.
That's cool.
Yeah, my recruiter was like, "Bro, I wanted this job when I enlisted, couldn't get it. You need to pick this job."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That sounds great." Jumping out of helicopters, saving people.
Yeah.
Anyway,
sign me up.
So my dad calls MEPS because my dad was a chief warrant officer.
Okay.
So he had made it through the enlisted ranks. He became a senior chief, E8 in the Navy, and then he crossed over to be a warrant officer, a Mustang they call them. Right. So he didn't go the O route, like 01, 02, 03. Yeah. He became a warrant officer, W2, 3, 4. Their motto, we did it the hard way. Anyway, so he calls MEPS and he's like, so, what jobs did you get? I'm like, well, I got these jobs and these jobs. And Dad, this job, my recruiter said, pick this job. He goes, I don't care about those. Do you have any, is missile technician one of the jobs? I was like, no, it's not. He's like, do you have any submarine jobs? Any submarine options? I was like, yeah, there's one. He's like, what is it? I was like, a machinist mate. He's like, pick that. I was like, but I don't want to do that though.
Yeah.
He's like,
jump out of helicopters.
He's like, no, pick that.
Yeah.
So I did, and that I forget, that was before boot camp, obviously. So anyway, so I go to boot camp with the rating, right? The job that the name, you're a machinist mate.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, go through boot camp, and then when you pick a submarine, so what's funny is like the submarine community is very small in the Navy. It's like numbered in the thousands. It's very, very tiny, couple thousand.
It's interesting, not to interrupt you. The guy that I just interviewed last week was also in the Navy and worked on a submarine.
Oh wow!
So
small world.
I know, and I've never met anybody that's ever worked on a submarine. So in 2 weeks' time, but
very good.
But go ahead. So, but super small percentage though.
Very, very small. I mean, the military's small, like 1%.
1%. Right.
Yep. So submarine service, very small. It's totally voluntary, but once you volunteer, like you can't.
You're in.
You're not getting out, right? So anyway, but you go through boot camp, and they don't teach you anything about submarines. They teach you everything about the surface fleet,
right?
Surface fleet and airplanes. And I'm like, I'm going through boot camp the whole time. Like, I don't even know any of this. This is dumb. Why am I? Anyway,
yeah.
So get through boot camp, and then you go to Groton, Connecticut. Sub school. That's where my dad was stationed when my parents got divorced. He must have been an instructor up there or something.
Okay.
But that was back in the early 90s, 91, 92. Well, so I go there for sub school, and sub school's fine. But then, so once you go through, you learn everything about submarines. Then they divide you up based upon your rating.
Okay.
Right. And rating in the Navy, I don't know what they call it in the Air Force, but in the Navy, your rate is your job. So they divide you based upon the job that they gave you. So all the machinist mates go over here, all the electronic technicians go over here, all the sonar techs go over here. Right? Okay. Well, I'm a machinist mate, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going over with these guys. I get a call from my detailer.
Is that like a recruiter kind of?
So sorry, I thought they were the same. So in the Navy, detailers are the guys who basically cut your orders.
Okay.
They basically control your career.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Here's your orders for this place. This is your ranking.
Interesting.
Right? They call them detailers.
Okay.
And it's a billet just like anything else.
Yeah.
So you can just, okay. And so my detailer calls me. He says, "Hey, Petty Officer Muyres, you're not a machinist mate anymore. You're a missile technician." And I'm like, "How the heck? What? How did this happen?"
Yeah.
I get orders to go down to Kings Bay, Georgia, as a missile technician. Right. This doesn't happen. Well,
did your dad have anything to do with it? Did he?
Yeah. Oh yeah. My dad. I mean, so let me just jump the gun a little bit, right? What we see in my father doing in this, while it is unrighteous, right? What he was doing was unrighteous.
Yeah.
What he was doing was not fair, right, to the system and the people who worked hard.
Right.
But what he was doing was he recognized that he had lost so much time with me. And he recognized that he had the pull to get me to where he was to spend time with him. Okay. So he was doing everything within his power to really make up for lost time. And so in some sense, I don't fault the motive. But in another sense, what he was doing was very wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I get the orders as a missile technician to go down to Georgia, at Kings Bay, for what they call C school, like letter C, like career school. I don't remember what that says. Maybe career school or something. Anyway, it's much more in depth school, learning just about what the missile technician job does. And basically, missile techs are nuclear weapons babysitters. That's pretty much it, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So
kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. So, so when you think about our nuclear weapons systems we have as our country, we have our ICBMs kind of all throughout that the Air Force controls and operates, officers mostly. Mm-hmm. Well, in the Navy, it's basically ICBMs on submarines, right? A movable, undetectable platform in the ocean with 24 world-destroying missiles. Okay,
it's kind of scary to think about.
It is, and they put guys like me to watch them.
20 years old, 21.
20 years old, but,
in charge of that.
Can't even tell the difference between his. Anyway, so I go down to Kings Bay for sea school, and there's two classes of submarines. There's Ohio class and Virginia class.
Okay.
This is changing now. I think the federal government's making new submarines now. I forget what they're going to be called. But at the time, there's SSBNs and SSNs. So the B stands for ballistic. So SSBNs carry ballistic missiles.
Okay.
The SSNs are the small ones that you'll see often, like breaking ice through, like Antarctica or whatever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They run with battle groups. So if you ever see like a poster with aircraft carriers and destroyers and the submarines, the SSNs, the Virginia class, are the ones running with those groups.
Okay.
So the BNs do not run with anybody.
Interesting.
Their mission is remain undetected and alert, ready to fire at a moment's notice. So they're just plowing holes in the ocean, doing figure eights in the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean just all the time.
Waiting for a call.
You're just waiting for the call. We launch it.
Yeah.
All right. Got it. On
Interesting.
China. Yeah. So I go through sea school, and so there's two bases. There's one in Kings Bay, and there's another base in Bangor, Washington. Right. Those are the two places that a missile tech can go, pretty much, for sea duty. Well, and the way they do it, as I'm sure you're aware, you go through your class, you go through your schools, and based on how well you did in the class, determines who gets to pick orders first. Right. So there must have been somewhere between like 15 and 20 people in my class. I didn't do great. I didn't do terrible. Right. I was like somewhere in the middle. But there was only like 2 orders to stay in Kings Bay. That's it. And so naturally, I wasn't top 2 in my class. I got orders to go to Bangor. That was until I came back to class one day, and they're like, "Muyres, your orders have changed. You're staying here in Kings Bay." I was like, "What?" And this dude who earned the orders looks at me and is like, "Yeah, bro, like what?"
Yeah.
I'm like, I have no idea.
Was this your dad again?
Yeah, that's right.
Because he was in Kings Bay. Did he live? So you guys did get to hang out when you were off duty a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
What he didn't count on was me getting married and having a wife when I moved down there.
Okay.
Right. That like she gets my.
It takes time.
Yeah. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you get the new orders then again.
I get the new orders. Staying. Yeah, I'm there. Yeah. So I get to the submarine. I was on the USS Tennessee, and SSBN 734. It was the oldest ship in the fleet at Kings Bay. It was commissioned. I think my dad was actually part of the commissioning. And those submarines aren't supposed to last. I don't remember the lifespan of the submarines, but when I got on it, it was past its lifespan.
Jeez.
Because they cost billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to make. So, which of course you would expect. It's a big hunk of steel.
Yeah.
That like, bro, the things in the sub they have these machines called ESGNs. I don't remember what it stands for. If I was a missile tech or if I was a machinist mate, I would know.
Yeah.
But as a missile tech, I have no idea. Where they suck in the water. They split the atoms and they pump oxygen into the boat.
Are you serious?
So you can stay submerged for weeks.
Wow.
It's
that's crazy.
You're just breathing in fresh oxygen from the water and recycled farts from your shipmates.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Anyway, so I get to the boat and they all know what happened. They all know that I shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And they all hate my dad.
Really?
My dad was like, he was very good at his job, but he was also a huge jerk. Humongous.
Yeah.
Right. they took their frustration on him out on me.
Out on you.
I was like, why do you hate me so much?
Out.
They're like, ask your dad.
Jeez.
So
welcome.
It was a great after a while they got to, after a couple of years they were like, you're
not so bad.
You're all right. I was like, thanks guys. Anyway, so I was on the submarine for 4 years. Mm-hmm. So it was a year of school, 4 years on the submarine. They said I could get off the submarine. It would have been a fifth year because the missile techs enlistments are 6 years.
Okay.
They said it would have been a fifth year, but they said if I re-enlisted, mm-hmm. they'd take that year and put it onto a shore duty. So I'd get off the submarine a year early, and I'd do 3 or 4 years on shore duty. Mm-hmm. Three years on shore duty. Mm-hmm. So I ended up being in the Navy for 8 years. And yeah. Oh,
interesting.
Yeah. So
you enjoyed your time. You like the camaraderie.
It is a weird bout. There's like a weird bout of nostalgia, which I'm sure maybe you experience sometimes too. Like, I would not go back to being in the military if they paid me. But sometimes I'm like,
but you miss aspects of it?
Yeah. Do I miss this? What is wrong with me? I went down to the submarine.
It's a good way to put it.
I went on the submarine at the Science Museum.
Down the river.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they pump this stuff into the air in the submarines called amine to make the air less flammable.
Okay.
At least is what they told us. Uh-huh. Which is right. You don't want fires to pop up on the submarine.
Yeah.
The whole thing will fill up with smoke in 5 seconds. You'll all die.
Yeah.
Anyway, I go down to the submarine, and I think it's a World War II submarine. Mm-hmm. It still to this day smells exactly how the submarine, all the submarines in fleet smell.
Interesting.
I go down there. I'm like, where am I?
Yeah.
I'm blast to the past, man. It's
same thing.
It's crazy.
Interesting. I asked Michelle this same question, and I try to ask all the veterans this, but so first of all, you just explained it pretty well. Like I say the same thing myself. I wouldn't go back. However, there's so many aspects of it that I miss about it, the camaraderie, just different things.
Yep.
And so when you got out, was it difficult getting out, or was it just smooth transition into regular society? Because you were active duty though too.
Yeah, active duty the whole time.
So what was that like?
Well, let me go back a little bit. So my wife and I got married when I was in Groton at sub school. Mm-hmm. We got married. Well, so I got out of boot camp in February of 10. Mm-hmm. We got married August of 10.
Oh, okay.
So we've been married. This will be our 15th year. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
We were married the whole time I was in the Navy. Mm-hmm. Which now, like as a pastor, if people ask me, if they should join the military, if they're married, my answer is always no. Mm-hmm. It's not for you, right?
That's hard.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because right, the Lord requires certain things of men, and being in the military almost necessarily, in almost every case, prevents you from fulfilling those obligations. Mm-hmm. Right? There's really no two ways about it. Right? Yeah. You can't take your wife on deployments. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a lot of deployments like in the Air Force and otherwise where they're not going on ships, but they're going to other countries.
Yeah. And
they're not there quite long enough to bring their families, but they're there for like 9 months.
Right.
Or like that's a crazy long time to be across an ocean from your wife.
Yeah.
The military they just don't care.
Yeah.
And I get it, right? But that's not a place, in my opinion, for married men. Mm-hmm. Right. So, my answer is always no.
Yeah.
Right. And I personally believe that it's sinful, right? Because you're like, yes, I'm a pastor. Yes, I'm a father. Yes, I have a vocation. But my primary duty, the duty with which Christ says you are like me the most, is in my marriage. Mm-hmm. Right? He says that I am Christ to my wife in Ephesians 5. So, so if I shirk on that duty, right, then really I don't know what else matters.
Interesting.
Personally.
Interesting.
Okay. Now that's significant because when I was in the Navy, this is when the Lord saved us, and I started going to school while I was in the Navy using tuition assistance. But when we were in the Navy, we went through a pretty significant rough spout, and it was a long slog of suffering. Mm-hmm. And so you asked, was it difficult when I got out? Mm-hmm. No, it was I didn't even make a plan. I was like, and I didn't even ask, like, was it Romans 8, Romans 9, somewhere around there, where, God says that the Holy Spirit prays for us with groanings too deep for words because we don't know how to pray for ourselves.
Yeah.
These kind of things. This was a situation like that. I didn't plan for anything. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't vision cast. I didn't do anything. I was like, I'm getting out. I'm getting away from this place.
Yeah.
My wife and I are going to go to safety and refuge, and that's
Work on your marriage.
That's all I care about.
Yeah.
That's it. And God was exceptionally gracious. And he gave us everything we needed.
Wow.
All the people we needed.
That's awesome.
The church we needed at the time. So like so was it easy? I loved every second.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm out. I don't care. See ya. Right.
Interesting.
Beat feet.
Yeah.
But that was my because of what we were going through. It was like it was a necessity. Right?
Yeah.
I remember, and kind of getting all over the place. Like my dad died when I was in the Navy. The stuff happened within my marriage while I was in the Navy, and I was just like, I just got to get out of here. So we were, what was I? 28. I think I got out December of 2017.
Okay. When did you give your life to the Lord, though? In the Navy at some point.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yeah. So.
Which is also interesting because, like I said, the guy that I just interviewed last week, he believes the time that he prayed the Lord into his heart to forgive him of all his sins was on a ship out at sea.
Well, buckle up,
in the
Buttercup.
Navy.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
So I'm just curious to hear yours.
Yeah. So okay. All right. Here's the story. This is what I say. So okay. So we come back from this deployment. Now I say this was the end of 2012. My wife's like, it absolutely was not the end of 2012. This is like middle of 2013. I'm like, my goodness, you glorious heavenly queen. What is going on with your mind? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that period. Okay. We come back from this deployment. Okay, let me back up. There's this guy on the submarine. His name's Rob. And he's a Christian. And he walks around the submarine. He's like, I love my job. I love doing this. This is the greatest thing ever. Now, so these submarines, there's two different crews. There's a blue crew and a gold crew. I was on the blue crew. He was on the gold crew. So we only saw each other when the submarine would come back from sea. It would be ported for about a month or two and it would be a period called refit, where you would just work on things that would break and whatever. So the crews would come together and they would work on stuff. That was the only time I saw him.
And how long would you be at sea for?
About 4 months.
Jeez.
So 4 months out, 4 months out. Should be 3-4 months in, then 3-4 months out. But if the submarine breaks, for instance, then they come back early, then the other crew just assumes the patrol. It's kind of how that works. And it just always seemed like my crew was always getting, getting the short end of the stick. Anyway, so we would only see each other during that 2-month period when the ship is back, and I would try to get this dude to swear. I would be like, just say the F word, man. Just say it. He'd be like, can't do it, man. I'm like, why? He'd be like, because the Lord doesn't let me talk that way. I'm like, I hate you. I hate you. I was like, you are the worst person. I just hate. I have an unbelieving mind.
Right.
I'm like, you are light, and you right, and I despise you. Okay, this is okay. But he liked me. He always liked me. He liked me so much.
Yeah, killed you with kindness and love.
So I come back from this deployment, and my chief says, "Hey Muyres, go to the upper level. There's 4 decks." He says, "Go up to upper level," and he says, "Find some O-ring out of some O-ring locker for some hydraulic manifold, whatever." So I go up to the upper level. I'm sitting on the deck, and I'm looking through this stupid locker for this stupid O-ring on this stupid submarine, and I just become overwhelmed by this sense of temporality and impermanence and purposelessness, like just a foreboding sense of just nothing means anything, right? Everything's pointless. This is what happens, and I'm just sitting there, and I get into this like slump. I'm like, my marriage doesn't matter, my job doesn't matter, and if I lose my job, I have no money. Like, I'm not going to be able to support my wife. What does it matter? What does anything matter?
Sounds like Ecclesiastes a little bit.
That's exactly
train
right.
of thought.
And I look down the P-way. I'm all the way at the front, right? Forwardmost part of the missile compartment.
Okay.
And I look all the way back aft, and the P-ways are like maybe 3 feet wide, passageways. And I see Rob beep-bopping. He's like, he's coming. He's like, Muyres. He's coming down to see me.
Of all people.
Yeah. I'm just like, great. Right. He comes over and he sees that I'm kind of like down in the dumps, and he's like, what's wrong? What's going on? He sits right next to me, and I tell him what I just said to you. And this joker, he starts telling me about the eternality of God, how God gives everything meaning, right? How Christ, right, gives us purpose in all of life. And I'm just like, and I heard him say this, and I'm just like, if this is true, I should probably follow this God. Right. Now at the time we were very, he was very like into Hillsong and Bethel and all this stuff. And so he says to me, he says, let's say the sinner's prayer, which now I would never do if you paid me. Right. But God works through the ignorance of people because he's faithful. Yeah. And so we prayed. And it's at that moment that I believe the Lord redeemed me. The timeline is a little shaky here. A few days, maybe a couple weeks later, him and his wife come over my house and go down Romans Road with my wife, right? Right. And they become saved. My wife gets saved. Okay. Right. And my wife had been reading through Proverbs, and she realized, she's like, I'm the foolish woman who doesn't build her house. I need to be like this godly woman who builds her house. So we both get saved around very close in proximity. And the church we went to was like literally right across the street. It was called Ignite because this was it's real edgy. Yeah, yeah. Ignite Church. Real edgy. Anyway. Right. So, but that's how we got saved. So Rob and I, we're still really good friends.
Are you really?
Oh yeah, we talk all the time.
Man, that's crazy.
He lives in Texas with his wife and his 3 beautiful daughters, and they go to a church in the same denomination we're in, and it's glorious.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I love hearing salvation stories, how people come to know the Lord. That's such an awesome story. I can just picture Rob bebopping around.
Yeah, man, he's like just coming down. Like, oh my gosh, this guy.
Wow. That's awesome. So you end up getting saved. You give your heart to the Lord. You serve in the Navy. You come back to Pittsburgh, 2018, I think we are in.
Yeah,
28.
I got out like late December of 2017. Okay. I moved my wife and our kids back, I think in September. And then I took terminal leave in December. Okay. And then I came back.
Okay. So what'd you get into? Was that like, I'm going to pursue?
Bro. Well, so here's the thing, right? Like, I remember distinctly, a week after the Lord saved me, I went up to Rob and I was like, bro, I think I want to be a pastor. Yeah. And he was like, bro, me too. We're going to be pastors together.
No way.
Like, we're both 22-year-old just idiots, right? we know nothing. All we see is this guy up here preaching. We're like, oh, that's glamorous. We want that. It's not what being a pastor really is at all. Right. I mean, that's like such a small percentage, right? Being a pastor now, I'm like, I'm so tired. All I do is preach. And sometimes I'm like, I say to my fellow pastor, I'm like, Joe, you should preach this one. You should, like we take turns, right?
Really?
And sometimes I'm like, oh, thank God he's preaching, because I don't think I have the time.
Need a break, yeah.
I love preaching. Right? I love the study, but it's like my plate's only so big.
Yep. Can't give what you don't have.
That's right.
You got to make sure you're being filled up.
So, what was your question?
So, so you said that you wanted to be a pastor when you got saved on the submarine. Right. So when you moved back, now it's like you have a chance to do whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, so I came back home, had no prospects for a job because, like I told you, made no plan. That was my only. I had one goal: get out. Yeah. So come back, and there's a mega church around here up in Wexford area, Orchard Hill Church. Okay. And I got hired on there as like a groundskeeper, kind of like a maintenance guy. I worked there for about a year, and it wasn't great. I didn't have my bachelor's degree yet. Okay. I started that in 2014. I finished I finished after being there for about a couple months. Okay. So I didn't have that credential to kind of bolster my resume.
Right.
But I worked there for about a year, and that was helpful because, like yourself, I got to see how a mega church runs. Not my flavor.
Yep.
Now I will say, they're not. It's kind of hard to say any mega church isn't like prosperity leaning because they're so big. Like, because in my mind, I would just say just plant more church, spread yourself out, right? Go, take all this money and go. But I don't. That's not like their emphasis,
right?
Anyway, at least from what I remember,
right?
So I don't want to cast too much shade on that. I think they're helping people love Jesus in their own kind of shallow way. Well, from there, I went and worked for a machining company. So there's these recruiting businesses that like help military people find jobs. Yeah. I'm sure you know.
In Pittsburgh here?
Yeah.
Pittsburgh hires veterans.
Yeah, Pittsburgh hires veterans. There's Orion, right? There's these different companies. They specialize in helping veterans get jobs like in technical trades and all that stuff. Well, so the job description of a missile technician says that I've done all this technical stuff. Okay. Which amounts to me just taking, test leads and like putting them in and going 115 volts.
Yeah.
That's about it. You're right. So so I get this job, and I remember in my interview, I go to this, it's a company that builds machine tools, machine tools are like industrial size lathes and milling machines that make all the stuff for your toasters and your cars and your right. And I remember I went to this interview, and the guy looked at me and said, "So do you know what a lathe does?" I was like, "It carves stuff into other stuff."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Do you know how it works?" I was like, "Nope." He was like, "Well, that's more than most people. You're hired." And I was
Are you serious?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so I did that job for like 2.5, 3 years, and it was in terms of like pay and benefits, it was a great job. Pay was a lot of money. But I was traveling like tri-state, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, all week, every week. Sometimes I spend days in a hotel fixing people's machines, installing machines. And after doing that for like 2.5, 3 years, I was like, I'm losing my family. Like, I can't do this.
Yep.
I'm not spending time with them. And I would try to come home like every night. And they eventually got mad at me. They're like, "You need to stay. Like, quit driving home," because they would pay mileage, right? Okay. So I was racking it up. Yeah. I was like, I'm not upset about it. But you're upset about it? Well, okay. And what's funny is when I went to go quit, my elder at the time, the church we were at, my shepherding elder was like, "I'm surprised it took you this long." Huh. Like he was like, in his mind, he was like, "You should have quit a long time ago." Yeah. And I was like, it was very confirmatory when he said that. I was like, I've made a poor decision staying here. Okay. After that, I started my own business, a handyman business. Okay. And I just told my wife, I said, "Hey, I'm going to start a handyman business." She was like, "Okay, sounds good." And at that moment, I realized, right, so we've been married at this point for, I don't know, 8 years, 9 years maybe, something like that. And at that point, I realized, wow, my wife really trusts me. I'm like, I don't even know if this is going to work. But she's like, "Sounds good, dude. Do your thing."
When most guys would not have got that response.
No.
That's awesome.
My wife is exceptionally good.
Yeah.
My wife, in the Bible, God says that he blesses men with wives, right? Wives are a gift. Okay.
Yep.
And the wife the Lord has given me she's exceptionally godly. She's also exceptionally beautiful. And I just she just is like, "Cool. Sounds good. I'm with you." I'm like, "You don't want to like challenge?
Sure?
You don't want to challenge me or anything? You don't want to like
sure about this?"
She's like, "I trust you." I'm like, wow. The Lord was good. Business was profitable. Awesome. Now there was kind of a medical. So I had when I got out of the Navy, I got Lyme disease, which is prevalent up here now, unfortunately. Yeah. And I got put on the medicine. What the symptoms I got was like arthritis everywhere. Okay. Right. I don't have it anymore because I got put on the medicine, but it's still in my knees. So I started this handyman business, and I'm down under sinks and doing all this, right, roofs and all this stuff. And after doing that for about a year, I was like, man, this is really, like, it hurts.
Taxing.
Very, very taxing. I was like, I don't know how to fix this problem. So, sometimes I regret leaving the business, but the Lord is sovereign, and what happened, and so I left that and I went and worked for PennDOT for a little while.
Okay.
In a driver's license center, and boy, was that fun. My first day on the job, I saw 2 women get into a fight.
Nice.
And I was like,
At the DMV?
At the DMV, and I was like, what have I gotten myself into here? Anyway.
That might be like one of the most hated places, at least, that I hear of.
I started sharing the gospel with people that worked there and telling them about Jesus. And I remember I was talking to this one black girl, and we were friends, and right, I was just telling her about Jesus and the gospel. She's a single mom, and I was telling her how the Lord can redeem her and this situation that she's in. And all these other black women that I worked with started calling me a racist and started telling her not to listen to the white man's gospel. And I was like, jeez, what is this white man's gospel? I have no idea what this means. My Savior is not white. Like, he doesn't look like me.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like you either. But ironically enough, like what I'm telling her has nothing to do with that.
Wow.
So it was very strange. I didn't work there. I worked there for about a year. And so after that, let me think what happened. Oh, after that, I went and worked at Enterprise in their car sales division for about a year.
Okay.
And I realized I hate selling cars. I hate selling anything. I remember this girl came in, college girl, and she's trying to buy some like $25,000 car. And we run a credit. Credit's fine, but she has no money, right? I'm like, you can't afford this car.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't, in good conscience, tell you to buy this car. You need to leave and go somewhere else, or pick a different car. And my boss got very mad at me.
I was gonna say, he's so probably like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, he was like, well, "You can't do that." I was like, "Well, I can't also, in good conscience, tell her to spend the money she doesn't have.
I can't sleep at night."
Yeah, so I didn't work there for very long. And then, so after that, I wasn't unemployed, but I worked as a contractor for this counseling agency. So one thing I didn't say was that, so I got my bachelor's degree in Christian psychology from Liberty University. Okay. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a biblical counselor because I'm a Christian. So I got back in, I don't know, 2019, 18, 19, something like that. I became a certified biblical counselor with the Association of Certified Biblical Counselors. And so I counsel people, both in my church and out of my church, with the Bible, with God's Word. And this counseling agency affiliated with Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Missouri, I think. Okay. They were hiring they wanted a male counselor. I was like, I'm a male and I'm a counselor. I fit the billet. Yeah. Anyway, so when I left Enterprise, I didn't have any prospects after that. Well, you know what? Let me back up real fast. I jumped the gun. I misspoke. After I left Enterprise, I got a job at Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge, which is a drug and alcohol rehab facility. And the one that I was at was thoroughly reformed, thoroughly Christian, right, to the nines, okay? And I worked there.
Where's their location in Pittsburgh?
Cheswick.
Okay. Yeah, I knew they're in Pittsburgh. I just didn't know. Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm working there, and I was like, so at the time I was in seminary. I was at Westminster Theological Seminary online, getting my master's degree. And I'm like, this is amazing. Yeah. I get to just teach the Bible.
Perfect fit.
All day, every day. This is great. And I'm just going to stay here for 4 years, do my master's degree, and I'm going to go get a pulpit.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Smooth sailing.
Well, the Lord, the Lord. Plans. But the Lord, yeah. During COVID, Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge has started taking insurance money from the state. Okay. And the state does not pay for Christian discipleship. Okay. In case you were curious, the state does not pay for people to become Christians.
Shocker.
So they came to Adult and Teen Challenge and said, "Hey, if you don't change your curriculum, and here's the curriculum you're going to teach. Right? Here's how you're going to counsel, evidence based. If you don't do this, we're going to strip you of all the monies we're giving you." And so they said, "Yes, Master, we'll do whatever you say." They didn't. And I wrote a scathing letter to them that they need to repent on their faces and dust and ashes, otherwise they're going to burn in hell forever. And they did not like that because they were capitulating on the gospel, right? Right.
They're caving, and then they took the ties that came with the money.
So they promptly fired me. To which I said, fair enough. And I rejoiced for being found worthy to suffer for the cause of Christ. It was after that I was technically sort of unemployed, and I got the job at this biblical counseling center. Okay. And I worked there for about a year, and the pay...
Is that like remote or...
It was all remote.
Yeah,
it was all remote. So I was counseling maybe, I don't know, 20-ish hours a week, remote. Also going to school with the GI Bill, so I was getting a little bit of money from the monthly housing allowance there. And so my wife was pregnant with our 5th child, and yeah, bro, it's great. It's fantastic. It's the best vacation you could ever ask for. And I don't know, man, there's something about having a pregnant wife. You're just like, everything in my life is glorious. You're glorious. That child in you is glorious. All of our other children waiting with bated breath for this child to be born, that's all glorious. Everything's glorious. It's just fantastic. Yeah. Everyone should try it. We're on the state's insurance because we didn't have any or money to pay for our own. And so she got kicked off, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get a real job, right? Because she's pregnant. So it was really wild. So she gets kicked off the insurance, and like the next day, I get a call from a recruiter saying like, hey, we're looking for drug and alcohol counselors for the jail. I'm like, okay, let's go. And I told the people at the counseling center that I was working at, I said, hey, this would happen. Yeah. Really unfortunate. Sorry for you. Got to go. So I went there, and this was a year ago. This was over a year ago now. And I get a job at the Allegheny County Jail as a drug and alcohol counselor. Because in Pennsylvania, you don't need a license to counsel drug and alcohol. Okay. You need a license to be a therapist or a psychologist. Okay. But you don't need a license to be a drug and alcohol counselor. Interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that. So I counsel now at the jail full time as a drug and alcohol counselor to men and women who are convicted of crimes and are incarcerated. It's a very interesting population of people to help minister to. I bet. Yeah. To minister the word of God to. So interesting. Yeah. So back to your what jobs have I done? I've done a lot. I've done a lot of jobs. And there was a time when I was very embarrassed by this. I was like, man, I am like, I cannot get my life together. Yeah. Like I have what is wrong with me? And another great friend of mine, best friend of mine, who I served with, we didn't serve together, but we went to church together at Ignite. Okay. He was a nuke on, I think it was on the Georgia, NSSGN. So they took SSBNs, they converted them. Anyway, so he's a pastor in Kentucky. Okay. And he told me one time, he said, Nick, all those jobs you had were not for nothing. God was preparing you to be able to speak to anybody. I mean, it's very uncommon for me to meet somebody that I can't connect with. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I've done a lot of stuff, and it's kind of short-sighted to say, wow, how embarrassing. Yeah. Like if you have the long view, you're going to be like, wow, he's trained me up, kind of thing. I've got some calluses on my hands, Yeah. Been around the block. Been through a lot. Yeah. Which is exactly why I wanted to interview you, because that's a perfect fit for this show. Because I think there's a lot of guys out there that are trying to navigate their career and things like that. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, like, even if people aren't Christians, right, God is still providentially orchestrating everything about their lives. Yep. Right. Right. God doesn't make, right. There's no, like, deism is not a thing. Right. God's not just standing back and just letting people go about their merry way. No. All of the people who hate Jesus Christ, even them, God is dictating and directing everything that happens in their life. Now, it's not for their good, and it's not for God's glory, right? Yeah. Well, it'll ultimately glorify God as if they don't repent and they're judged on all this. But like for me, for Christians, right? All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. Amen. So when I get all these jobs and I get laid off and I get yelled at and people all this, all this stuff, it's like, God, apparently this is good and for Your glory. Let's see how this works out. Yeah. But then you get into a church context where half of your parishioners own businesses, and you're like, oh, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to stay up endless hours because you're freaked out about getting work, and winter's coming. Where how are you going to shift your business and doing your tax? Like I know about that. I've done that. You can relate. I get that. Yeah. So
So I want to get to a couple things. I want to get to you pastoring the church right now, but I also want to just quickly touch on your job at the Allegheny County Jail. I've done prison ministry at the Allegheny County Jail. Absolutely love it. Chuck Ondo, who I've had on the show, he takes me into the Veterans Pod.
Oh, nice.
It's amazing. I get to just go in, preach the gospel. When I lived in Texas, I did the same thing, and I absolutely love it. But I want to talk to you. I just want to ask you, like, what have you learned there? What have you what's been like have you counseled anybody that just like really shocked you, or just have you had a crazy situation talking with someone there that where like the light bulb came on and they got saved, or are you not allowed to share your faith in that role, or what?
So I think the Lord has done a good job in helping me be able to share biblical truth, either overtly or covertly. And because of the nature of the counseling milieu in America, if you don't have someone's permission to counsel them from the Bible, you then have to you have to counsel them from the Bible, but not use chapters and verses, right? So I'm going to tell you all the same stuff. You're just not going to know.
A great principle. You're just telling them it's straight out of the Bible.
Yeah. So we have a curriculum we follow, and it's a 26-week class, right? So this is what I do specifically.
Yeah.
So I have a 26-week drug and alcohol class, and we go over, like forgiveness and spirituality, grief and substance use, communication, right? All these things. So and none of these things are unbiblical, right? Like the Bible talks about communication. The Bible talks about grief. The Bible certainly talks about forgiveness. And so everything that I tell these people is biblical. Full stop, right? All of it. And whether they know that or not is beside the point. But some of them are like, I'm a Christian. And now I feel like I have a moral obligation to tell these people when they come to my group to say like, hey, just so you know where I'm coming from, I am a Christian.
Okay.
I am a pastor.
Yeah.
I'm not neutral. I'm coming from a perspective. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not going to try to shove anything down your throat, but this is what I'm going to tell you.
Right.
You can say, Nick's full of baloney.
Yeah.
right? And go about your merry way. But what I found time and time again is that the feedback I get from these guys is like, Nick is personable. Nick is funny. Like Nick's, he's
relatable.
Because one of the ethical principles, which I think is so dumb in like the professional counseling and the social work world, is like you're not allowed to like share your life with these people. But you and I both know that the only way people actually have true help and hope is when you give your heart to people, right? Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians. He says to the Corinthians, he's like, I've given myself to you. If there's no closeness between us, it's because you haven't given yourself to me. Right?
Yeah.
Like, this is the reality. Like the only way, in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, God will help you, right? God will offer the same benefits to you that he's offered to me, right? So he'll help you with the same help he's given me as I help you with the same help God. So like there's this reality, like the only way that anyone's going to be helped and healed is through the love of God being channeled through his people to other people. Right? That's how that works. And so for there to be an ethical principle in these philosophies, schools of thought, ideologies that just says you can't do that, is like we're chopping these people off at the knees. Like they're never going to get better. So while I don't tell these people where I live or the names of my children or the names of my wife or how many children I have, I do tell them like I'm married. I go through this stuff with my wife. Like just so you know, living in the projects isn't much different. Like women. That's what women want. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean you think it's weird that a woman wants to be safe and secure and have money to buy flowers? What are you talking about? That's normal.
Yep.
Why are you mad about that?
Yeah.
So I hear crazy stuff, as I'm sure you have also. Crazy stuff all the time. The thing that I think startles me the most is that without fail, I don't know the statistics. This is anecdotal, okay? So, but without fail, in my experience, I've never met one single man or woman who is in jail and has had a healthy relationship with their father. It just doesn't exist.
Wow.
Okay? And so what these people have is severe father hunger. Okay, they don't know how to be men, and they don't know what kind of men to look for at all. And the only place you can find that is in Scripture as you look to the perfect man who is Jesus Christ.
That's right.
Right, that's it.
Yep.
What does it mean to be masculine, and what kind of masculine man should you look for? Jesus, right? Everything he did, right? His strength, his zeal, his mourning, right? His piety, everything that he is what a man ought to be, and is who women should look for, and is who man should emulate themselves after.
To be, yeah.
But they don't know that. So no wonder they're in jail.
Yeah.
Right? Their fathers didn't know it. And it's a, in my opinion, it's a cultural thing, right? Some cultures are awful, and some cultures breed, right, terrible results. That's right. It's the concept, the biblical reality of sowing and reaping, right? You will never reap what you have not sown.
Yep.
It won't happen. And so when you sow corruption and debauchery and evil and promiscuity, you're going to reap
what you're
that.
Going to get.
Okay? And so we shouldn't look at this and be like, how has this happened?
Yeah.
No, we know. What are you talking about? This is not a mystery. This is black.
Results.
This is black and white, man. You know, you don't raise your kids right? You have 17 kids with 14 baby mamas. Like, what do you think is going to happen? David had all the money in the world, all the power in the world. He did the same thing.
Yeah.
Couldn't father any of them. They all were, I mean, by and large, they were all terrible.
It's crazy.
Right? Okay. So even Solomon, one of the greatest, most wealthiest, wisest leaders that the world has ever known, followed in his father's footsteps and left the Lord because of, right, he did what his father did. Okay?
Same thing applies, yeah.
So like, I think that's probably the thing that I find most shocking and the thing that I find most needed in that particular population. Now, I think that's probably rampant throughout all men, as at least in our generation. Just some men have grown up with more resources to not let them get to that level.
Yeah.
Right? They've had more societal roadblocks that kept them from doing crack or heroin. Okay. But they're going through the same things. Right? They still don't have a good dad.
Yeah.
Right.
So by you talking to all these people that have never had a father, they don't know how to emulate or who to emulate. How has that then affected? And this is a question I wish I would ask a lot of the guys that I interview, and sometimes the story it goes on and we never get to it. So, you know, how has that impacted the way you father? And you said you have 5 kids. How does that impact the way you are a husband, a father? Does it make you go home and want to like be the total opposite? You know?
Well, what it makes me want to do is it makes me want to go home and actually embody biblical, you know, the Bible's commands and precepts for me. It makes me look at my children and recognize like they're one step away from being these guys, right? Yeah. The difference between my kids and those kids, and that's what these kids in jail.
Yeah. Bro,
there's kids in jail who have who are in their 20s, late teens, early teens, who've like murdered people. Like, that's crazy to me, right? So the difference between my kids and those kids is not much, except for the fact that my kids have a father. And I don't leave my wife out of this. My wife is a godly, wonderful, godly woman. But the house is led by the man, by the father. And everyone else follows suit, right? He sets the temperature, he sets the mood, he sets the direction, the goals.
Right.
And then the mother, as a dutiful, right, first sergeant, is like, children, we're enacting his goals and we're following his mission.
Yeah.
And then this is how this works. And so what it makes me want to do is say, you know, and not like a military regime, but like, is my family, is my house, are we functioning the way God requires, right? Am I raising my children in the fear and admonition of the Lord?
Yep.
Right? Am I teaching them to obey all that Christ has commanded? Do they see joy in their mother and father? Do they see their mother submitting to their father? Do they see their father sacrificing for their mother?
Yeah.
Right? Do they see me like correcting them consistently, judiciously, and in accordance with biblical principles? Right? Am I making them angry? You can't do that. That's sinful. Right?
Yeah.
Fathers, do not provoke your children. Yeah, that's right. Don't provoke them to anger. Right? The anger's right. They're guilty of that sin, but my goodness, I bear a great deal of responsibility for that.
Yeah.
And so, also, like, it makes me want to be very honest with my children. Like, hey, just so you know, there are kids your age that are doing crack right now. There are kids your age that have to sell their bodies to get money. There are kids your age whose mothers are doped up and have boyfriends that come home and abuse their daughters. Just so you know, this happens. And it's like 5 miles down the road. Okay? The only thing keeping you from that is the fact that God loves you, and he's given you a mother and father who actually care about the future.
Yeah. And who love God themselves.
That's right. And that's right. Who love Jesus and want to do, right? And we want our family to look like a biblical family.
Right.
Right. So it makes me, I really take my job serious. Right. And now our culture has so grossly diminished the family. Right. There's only 3 levels of government: family, church, and state. And so I'm the head of one of those. So are you, right?
Yeah,
I'm the head
true.
of one of those governmental spheres. And the family is the most instrumental. All culture is built off the family. So there's a saying, right? As goes the father, so goes the church. As goes the church, so goes the society or the culture, right?
Interesting.
So if I don't lead my children well, right? What we're seeing right now is because of the failure of fathers, right? Just
I agree.
Writ large, right?
Couldn't agree more.
So when I go home, I'm like, this is going to be a house full of joy and gladness, but also of staunch obedience to God's commands, because we love Him, right? And we're going to repent when we sin. We're going to seek forgiveness when we sin, right? We're going to be disciplined when we sin, right? We're going to rejoice in the feasting the Lord gives us and be glad, and we're not going to grumble and complain. We're going to be rejoice and be glad, right? You know, my daughters. I don't know if you have any girls.
No, just 2 boys.
So I have two girls, one right after the other, and you know they'll get upset if they don't get the things they want, and I'll be like, "Why are you grumbling? Do you not have everything you need? Has the Lord not provided for you what you need?" Right now, of course, boys do that too.
Yeah.
But girls they have a way of being a little more stubborn, you know, to some degree, right? So you got to be like, you know, no, your grumbling is sinful. I don't care if you give me the pouty lip. You're not going to manipulate me, right? I love you. You're beautiful. And like last night, I was just saying my daughter, I was like, outwardly, you're gorgeous, right? Your blue eyes, your blonde hair, you're beautiful.
Yeah.
You are. But your sin in your heart is making you disgusting. You need to repent of that, right? And so, like, being very honest with my children, like, this is not beautiful, right? I don't want you to end up there. I want you to marry a man, have loads of kids, and build, right? That's what I want. So that's what I'm trying to inculcate in my family.
That's awesome.
And so I see. So basically, what it does is it like kind of lights a fire. I see the dirge over here, and I don't want that here. You know, it's that kind of thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to. It's funny you're talking to your kids about that. I girls. Well, you have girls and boys. I just only have boys. But I was doing the exact same thing with them. Literally, well, I do it almost every day. But doing the same train of thought, making sure they're thankful, grateful for each and everything that they have. Reminding them that just a couple miles down the road, you know, that kid didn't eat today. You know, so that's interesting. And I love what we're talking about. Is another reason of me starting this show, because Steadfast, because I believe the breakdown of the family unit and who is the head of the family unit, the father, and the father should be chasing after the real father, the heavenly father. So when us as dads are not getting into the word, seeking after God each and every day, so that then we can lead our families, the breakdown of the family unit, and then what you sow, you reap, right? So just everything that you're saying, I love everything that you're saying, because that just speaks to the purpose of this show. It speaks to the men that are watching this show. It speaks to what I want them to get out of it, and everything. So my last question before we kind of wrap up here, how did that then lead into pastoring? So you worked for drug and alcohol. Now you work for the county jail. When did the pastoring, and how does that all play in?
Well, so let me pin that question just for a second, because I think so what you just said, I think it's important to, if I may, just say one more thing. So I think a lot of people can look at this and be like, well, Nick, you know, Matt, you know, you guys, you know, you've had this stuff in your life the whole time. You know, well, and I think from the previous things I've said in the podcast, it's like, well, no, I didn't have a dad growing up, and the stepfather I have now, well, he's a good man, right? He's not a Christian. He's provided for me for the at least half my life. Like he's and even now, like he loves me, he loves my kids, but he's not right the kind of Christian that a kid needs. Right, so I didn't start off knowing this stuff, right? I didn't start off like at the peak.
Right. Great thing to mention. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you're saying.
What happened was I get out of the Navy, right? My wife and I and our 2 kids at the time moved to Pittsburgh, and our marriage is in shambles, right? We don't know how to raise kids. We've been Christians for 5 years. We know nothing. And we start going to a Reformed Presbyterian church in the North Hills.
Okay.
And this elder, he looks at me and he's like, "You suck. You don't know how to be a man. You're a little boy. Come here, let me teach you." Okay.
What'd you say?
All right. No, he didn't say those things exactly, right? But effectively, he's like,
essentially,
he's like, you don't know anything. Let me teach you how to do these things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Were you offended, or did you?
I wasn't offended. I was like, thank you.
That's awesome.
Right.
Because a lot of guys would have been. But
that's right.
That's awesome.
That's because that's pride. That's all it is. That's
yeah.
pride. Oh, I got her going on. No, you don't. Your kid's having sex and they're 17. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And she's pregnant. That's not okay.
Yeah.
They're not married. What do you think you got it all going on? What are you talking about? Your wife hates you. What do you mean? So
he did that. He said that to you.
Well, yeah. I mean, so him and his wife came to my house for probably, 18 months every week.
Wow.
Maybe somewhere around there, right? Maybe a little less. This is years ago, so it's hard to remember. But they came to my house every week, and they counseled my wife and I.
Wow.
Taught us how to be parents, how to have a good marriage, how to be a man.
That's awesome.
Right? And like that's what I needed.
Yeah.
Okay. So like there's very few things like that I say now that I didn't get from him. Of course I'm learning more and more things and listening to other people, but like he set this firm foundation for me. Okay, this is what this means. I started off like when we first got together, I might as well just had like a spin hat on and my finger up my nose. Like I was just an idiot. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And he was like, this is here. Read this book. This is how you raise your kids. This is how you discipline. This is how you worship. I didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
Right. So what it takes is humility, and somebody who's willing to really step in your life, whether you want them to, you ask them to, or they force their way in.
Yeah.
Because they see that you're just like you're going down.
You need help.
Yeah, you need help. That's right. So I just want to say that because like this is not and all of that is from the Lord. Like really, it was the Lord saying, "My son, you're awful. You need help.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you this man, and he's going to help you." And I'm eternally thankful for that.
Yeah.
My marriage is what it is now. It is heaven on earth, right? It is a dewy garden full of ripe vegetables and fruits, because the Lord was kind to me and put men and women in my life over the past 10 years who have told me that I suck and have shown me a better way. That is the only reason.
Yeah.
Just full stop.
Yeah. And if I may too, the Bible, I always love the Bible verse, choose whom this day whom you will serve, right? Because along that way that you just said, you very easily could have been offended and just been like, screw this.
That's right.
I'm going to do this on my own. But I love that you brought all this up because it's like, that's a product of making those choices.
Yeah.
Making a choice.
Yeah.
Choose who you will serve this day, right? So I love that, man.
Yep.
Not only did you have the help from other people
and
God's goodness and kindness and love for you, but you also chose to chase after him.
Yeah, God is very kind.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that he's given me the heart to want to do that.
Amen. Yeah.
So again, the pastor, right?
Yeah.
So again, I felt the call. I felt the desire a week after being saved. And the fire has never been snuffed out. It's smoldered at times, but it's never been snuffed out. And sort of to make a short story long, a couple of years ago, so we were at our church, and I was pursuing the pastorate in that church. Now, one of the particular beliefs that you have to be in that church is you have to believe in what's called exclusive psalmody. Right, we sing psalms, only the psalms from the Psalter for worship, which is first of all, too many churches are not singing enough psalms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I fell out of that conviction, which disqualified me from being an officer in that particular denomination, which is fine.
Okay.
I also came under the conviction of paedo communion, what's called paedo communion. So like giving children, little children, the bread and wine, which also disqualified me from being an officer in that particular denomination. Mm-hmm. So what that then required was that I find another place where I could call home.
Yeah.
So I did a year at Westminster Theological Seminary, and I've been swimming in Presbyterian, Westminsterian waters for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I'm not saying I'm like some kind of expert, like, I can read it backwards and forwards, right? Whatever. And that's not what I'm saying. But I thought I didn't want to be there because it was just, I know all this stuff already. I've been reading these books for 10 years. Like, I'm very familiar.
Yeah.
I'd like to be somewhere where I could get a wider swath of the Christian faith. Not because I'm going to believe that, but because I know that I'm going to minister to people who don't fall into this very niche Westminsterian box, okay? And so Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, they still have somewhat of a reputation of being reformed and faithful. R.C. Sproul taught, I think, at...
Love him.
Yeah, great guy. I think he taught either at Gordon or Conwell. They were two seminaries, and they kind of merged together. I forget which one he taught at, but so they have a reputation, and they're Presbyterian, which I am a Presbyterian. And so I'm now doing my master's degree there. I'll be done next spring. So, but I switched it to go there because I knew this. So the denomination that I'm in now is called the CREC, the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. So it's a very ecumenical group, denomination. There's Baptists in it. There's Lutherans. There's Anglicans. There's Presbyterians. All are Reformed, right? So there's no like liberalism or women pastors or something like that. But it's an ecumenical denomination that says like we need to break down these dividing walls, and although we disagree on some secondary matters, let's come together and form a body kind of thing. So that was where I found home. So I left the Reformed Presbyterian church that I was at, and me and my family and another family began to plant a church. Okay. And this was either late 23 or very early 24. We started planting this church. And, so we're going through all the humdrum, all the process, getting people to come there, getting accreditation from the denomination, all this. Yeah. Well, so what ended up happening was the man who I was planting it with, he decided he didn't want to do the plant anymore. Okay. But we had been going to another church in Freeport, the church that I'm pastoring now. We had been going there because we needed to worship somewhere. So we were going there for that time while planting another church. Well, once this fellow left and didn't want to plant the church anymore, they asked me if I was going to keep doing the plant. I was like, well, no, sad to say, once he left, and he was a very prominent personality. He was like the glue. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Businesses, church plants have the glue, right? Yeah. And so once he left, everyone else just kind of was like, okay, we're out, Well, so they asked me, they're like, would you ever consider, pastoring with us and helping us enter into the CREC? I was like, sure. Yeah. And I'd been with them for a year at that point, so I loved these people, right? I'd been worshiping with them. I've gotten to know them, had fellowship with them. So it wasn't like a really offhanded comment. Right. So, so I love these people. So I was like, sure. So, so my being a pastor is actually fairly recent. Okay. Probably, I don't know, 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, we had an ordination service at our church. Okay. Me and a few of the deacons were ordained along with another pastor. Okay. And I've helped the church kind of fall into a Presbyterian structure. We're now a mission church in the CREC. So the way the CREC does it is like you get a sponsor church, and then you're in mission status for 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, you go through a battery of testings for the pastors, making sure that you're not stupid and they agree with, we agree with each other. And then you're a full bona fide member in the denomination. So my journey to the pastorate was it was not typical, but it was no less legitimate. Going through seminary, the church called me to be their pastor. The church ordained me to be their pastor, and now I'm their pastor. And so me and the other pastor there, Joe, we take turns preaching, and we do a lot of counseling there. Like we do pastor stuff.
Yeah.
We're pastors. We do pastor stuff.
That's awesome.
But so finally, the Lord was kind, and He brought to fruition the desire I had, 13, 14 years ago. And really, the thing, too, is like any man who's aspiring to the office of an overseer, if his wife isn't on board, even if she's sinning, right? Even if it's sinful, you can't do it, right? Yep. And so my wife, after years of knowing that I wanted to do this, the Lord sanctified her heart, and she was like, "Yeah, this is great. Awesome. I want you to do this." And so she's a Proverbs talks about woman folly and woman wisdom, and if you're a woman, like you don't want to be woman folly. You want to be the wisdom,
wise woman.
And so when you get married, you ought to marry the wise woman. Right? I tell young men this all the time: who you marry will either make your life heaven on earth or a living hell. 100%. And there's really no in between. Right? And so my wife, by God's good grace, she's wise, right? She, goodness, I don't even know. Life would not be what it is without her. But she's like, yes, I think this is a good time. And so she's fully on board with my counseling, with my pastoring.
That's awesome.
So the pastorate is, and I don't know what the Lord's going to do with the church. We're a small church. We only have, I think, 6 families. It's still a church, right?
Absolutely.
And Lord willing, we'll grow over time, and we'll see what happens. But pastoring, I often say there's like eight. What's the greatest day of your life? I had 8 great days, right? When I got married, when I got saved, when all my kids were born, and then when I became a pastor.
That's awesome.
I'm like, those are my favorite days.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, man.
Where can people get? I want people to get in touch with you. You said you write a blog.
Yeah, me and my buddy John.
Plug all that.
Yeah, my buddy John and I. He's the pastor in Kentucky.
Okay.
Wonderful, faithful, godly man. We've been doing a blog now since I think 2017. Okay. Maybe 2018. It's called Reformed and Confessional. It's reformedconfess.com. Tons of blogs on there. Pick something, right?
Yeah.
Also, we do some podcasting there. We're both pastors. We're both family men, right? So we both have full-time jobs. So we do as much as we can.
Okay.
We don't make any money from the thing. We do it from love of the game. You know what I mean?
Yep. That's it.
So we've been doing that for a long time. And there's a bunch of other writers on there. I think we're closing on like maybe 10 writers or something.
Okay.
But him and I write the most. So reformedconfess.com. Also, so the church that I pastor is Trinity Reformed Church up in Freeport, PA.
Okay.
TrinityReformedPA.org.
Okay.
.org.
Okay.
And then those are the 2 major places. Yeah, and then I guess you can also find me if you go to acbcbiblicalcounseling.com. You go to their map for counselors. I'm on the map for counselors there.
All right.
My time for counseling people is not really. I don't really have a whole lot of time for that.
Yeah.
Because I'm already counseling people, so like my docket's full. But I'm more than happy to help people if they need help or to find people who can help them.
Or come to your church or
come to the church. And receive help on the Lord's Day.
Awesome.
For whatever. But those are the places, man.
Awesome.
And if you reach out to me or anyone that Reform Confess, we'll always get back to you. We're pretty good at that. Whether it's me or John or we'll get back to people.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nick, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks,
it's been awesome getting to know you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more here after we shut this off. So, guys, I'm going to put all of his details in the show notes. Check out the description of the YouTube video and Spotify everywhere. Check out his church. Check out his blog and everything about him. So, thank you for watching the show. We'll catch you again next time.